I confess, I slept with my husband's boss. It was my first day off in 3 months. Recently, my company assigned me a huge project. Between a weekend of family obligations and some last-minute tasks, I was looking forward to some peace and quiet. I sent the kids to Grandma's and prepared to do nothing. I was relaxing in the living room when the doorbell rang. My husband came down the stairs to answer the door. I heard voices coming toward me. I wondered who it could be. And then I thought, I look like a slob. Don't get me wrong, I don't look bad. I'm 35 years old, 5 feet 5 inches. I keep myself toned. I have nice hair. But at that moment, I was wearing no makeup. I was wearing a white-ribbed sweater, a pair of loose workout shorts I pulled off the bedroom floor, and my hair was barely brushed. My husband walked into the room with 4 guys. I knew 2 of them were guys he works with. The other 2 I didn't know. I felt awkward when they walked in. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wasn't dressed for anyone, and I didn't want anyone there. I looked up and said hello. I realized I had to get up. I stood up and, looking at my husband perplexed, went to be introduced. I had no idea why they were here. I was even a little annoyed that they were here. When I stood up, I saw that all the guys were looking at me. I realized that I was being seriously tested. It was kind of creepy. Then I realized I wasn't wearing a bra, and my thin blouse was tight around every curve. My size is 36 centimeters, but all those 36 centimeters were on display. My shirt stopped above my belly button, and my shorts were 2 inches lower, showing off a decent belly. Now I was even more pissed off. I really couldn't run and cover up, and I still didn't understand why they were here. Wrinkling my nose, I realized that the good news was that no one noticed my lack of makeup. My husband simply said, "Hey babe, didn't see you there. The guys came over to watch the game." Mentally, I was choking him. That was my only day of doing nothing for the next few weeks. I didn't want to do nothing with his friends, especially the ones I really didn't know. Instead of smothering him, I reached out and introduced myself. The 2 guys I'd met before were named Bob and Paul, both of whom worked with my husband. They were average-looking, both in their mid-30s. Nothing outstanding, nothing bad. I remembered that Paul was married. The other 2 I wasn't familiar with. They were from out of town. They were on the same team as my husband and worked on a project together. One was named Gary. He was from the same mold. Nothing special. The last guy's name was Tom. Tom was older. I found out later that he was 45. It was obvious that he was the leader of the group. It was evident by the way they all looked at me expectantly when he was introduced. I don't know what kind of reaction they were expecting. Maybe I was supposed to bow down? He was tall, handsome, with a beautiful smile. He didn't ogle me like the other 3. He threw me an assessing glance and then didn't take his eyes off me. If I wasn't so angry with my husband, I would have loved to meet this man. And since I was angry at my husband, I didn't enjoy meeting anyone. I needed to deal with him. I looked at him and said, "Honey, I didn't realize we had company." He said he had just gotten a call from Gary and he invited them over. I don't know if that was a good reaction to my statement, but it certainly wasn't. Then, to set the record straight, he said, "You said you didn't want to come out, so I figured they could come here." He often did this kind of thing. We'd discussed it before. I glanced at him, but he didn't notice anything. Maybe he didn't notice, but Tom did. Tom quickly said that he thought they might be in the way and maybe they should head to a local bar to watch the game. I thought, great idea. My husband said, "That's silly. We have a huge TV, plenty of beer, and Jill can make sandwiches." And that was it. I knew I was going to kill him when he went to sleep that night. I said in the kindest voice I could muster, "Please, it's no big deal. Come on in." The guys came in, and I started to gather my things around me. As I bent down to pick up my pillow, I heard a quiet sigh. I realized that my shorts were pretty short and loose, and they must have seen most of my body when I bent over. Now I was really pissed off. His friends are all staring at me, taking up my day, and they also want sandwiches. An evil thought occurred to me. My husband is a little jealous. He hadn't realized yet that I was being tested, but I knew if he did, he would be furious. I decided a little irritation would do him good. I told them to sit down, and I went to get a beer. I went to the kitchen and got 6 bottles and held the cold, wet bottles to my breasts. My breasts reacted to the cold. The condensation caused my shirt to stick to my skin and become a little transparent. I slid my shorts a little lower on my hips and brought out a beer. As I served it, I made sure to lean over everyone and hand them a beer. They tried their best to pretend not to look at my breasts. I held my body toward my husband and those around him so he could see my shorts sliding up and showing my cheeks as I bent over. I handed Tom his beer. He smiled, looked me in the eye, and thanked me. I was starting to like him. Finally, I handed my husband the last beer. He saw my top and realized everyone had seen it. I could see him tense up. Not wanting to make a scene, he just said, "Thanks, babe. Do you want to change?" I stood up. I stood up where everyone could see me. I straightened my back, showing off my breasts. I replied, "I wasn't going to. I can if you want." He looked at me and his friends, who were mostly staring at me, and said that he thought I should. I went upstairs laughing to myself. He could be such an asshole. Tom came to mind. He seemed nice. I got to my room and started thinking about what to wear. I was comfortable. Why did I have to change? I really didn't want to change. I only had to change just because he ruined my day. On the other hand, I'm a girl, and I like to look good. I was still annoyed with my husband. An evil thought popped into my head. I went into the house, brushed my hair, and put on my makeup. Nothing fancy, just my usual fresh look. I went and grabbed the clothes I decided to wear. I took a summer outfit. It was a bustier-style top with straps and 4 buttons in the front. It definitely pushed up and showed off what I had. Unbuttoning the top button showed even more. Attached to the outfit was a short denim layered skirt. The skirt sat low on my hips and came down to about half a thigh at most. Between the top and skirt, my stomach was exposed from my rib cage to my hips. I finished it off by wearing strappy sandals with a small heel. I looked in the mirror. I looked good. More than that, I looked sexy. Perfect. Not to be unsubstantiated, I leaned over to check the neckline. I checked the back. Well, what lady bends over with straight legs from the waist anyway? I was ready to go out. As I walked down the stairs, Tom saw me first. He gave me an appraising look, gave me a thumbs up, and smiled. I smiled back. The other guys saw Tom and turned to look. All of their faces lit up except for my husband's. He was clearly frowning. I simply said, "Anyone need another beer?" As I walked across the room toward the kitchen and counted who wanted a beer, I may have wiggled my hips a little more than usual. I certainly didn't have to bend over and pick up the bottle, but I did. I stood up. I saw my husband frowning again, the 3 guys looking shocked, and Tom with an amused smile. He seemed to get the joke. My husband followed me. He was furious. He spoke to me in an angry whisper. "What are you doing?" "I'm bringing beer." What are you wearing?" he said, raising his voice a little. I pouted and replied, "You don't like it?" Then he said words he later regretted. He said, "You look like a cheater." I turned around, looked at him, got my face in his face, and attacked him. "First you bring home a bunch of strangers on the only day off I've had in months. And then, when I'm polite enough to say nothing and treat you to appetizers, you call me a cheater? Really? You don't even know what a cheater is." Now he realized I was angry. Stammering, he turned and walked out of the room. Now I was really angry. He was right. I had dressed up to tease him, but away with it. I was comfortable until all his friends showed up. I collected my beer and put it on a tray, and thinking I was going to show him a cheater, I walked in, serving the beer off the tray. I leaned over and offered the tray to each guest, making sure my body was facing the rest of the guests. I'm sure a little bit of my cheeks were visible. The guys just gawked in silence. Tom took his beer, thanked me, and told me they were lucky to have such a beautiful hostess. He had class. I blushed slightly and thanked him. I walked over to my husband. He was frowning and his eyes were burning through me. I handed him the beer and then leaned over, exposing my body even more to my guests. I whispered to him, "Is that frank enough?" I smirked at him, turned, and walked away. I was starting to enjoy myself. At the kitchen door, I stopped, looked over my shoulder, and asked, "Are you ready to eat?" That kind of turn really showed off my legs. My husband said nothing, only frowned. The guys didn't know what to say. Tom, again a gentleman, said, "Please don't flaunt yourself. We can order appetizers. You don't have to wait for us." I smiled. I definitely liked this guy. I softened and said, "I don't mind. I'll be right back." My husband followed me into the kitchen again. In an angry whisper, perhaps a little louder than he wanted, he said, "You're embarrassing the hell out of me. Stop acting like a stupid cheater." I was about to scream at him and start throwing things at him. Tom saved him. Tom walked into the kitchen. He had obviously heard what was said. He put his hand on my husband's shoulder and said, "Back off. We interrupted her day, and Jill is very cooperative." My husband started to say something, but apparently Tom was really in charge and he stopped. Tom said to my husband, "Go sit down. I'll take over." Take charge? What did that mean? My husband cast a glance at me, turned to Tom, sighed, and returned to his seat. Tom smiled at me and said, "We've obviously interrupted your day." I waved him off and said it was no big deal. Tom put his hand on my arm and said he was sorry they interrupted my day, but not sorry he got to meet me. It was a sincere compliment, and considering my day, the compliment was appreciated. I became fully aware of his hand resting on my arm. I looked up at him, and noted again how handsome he was. I felt a little uncomfortable under his gaze and lowered my eyes, but I didn't move. He put his finger under my chin, lifted my head, and said, "I think you're beautiful. I don't think you're a cheater." I smiled. He added, "But I'm sure if you wanted to, you'd be an amazing cheater." My mouth dropped open, but there was a smile playing on his lips and a sparkle in his eyes. I punched him on the arm with a laugh and said, "You'd like that, wouldn't you?" I pointed to the counter and said, "Let's get some appetizers." I turned to leave, and he playfully slapped my body and said, "But yeah, I'd like that." I looked at him, stuck my tongue out, moved my body, and said, "Time for a snack." He laughed. And then a double meaning came to me. I blushed, laughed, and said very slowly, as if I was talking to an idiot, "Snack time." He feigned innocence and with feigned offense in his voice said, "Sure, that's what I meant." I went to the refrigerator to get the cheese and salami. They were in the bottom drawer for fresh produce. I wondered why. I leaned right up to my hip to get them. Sure enough, most of my body was on display. Tom walked over to me, and I handed him the cheese and salami. I stood up and, smiling, said, "The knife is over there." Tom started cutting, and I got the crackers out. I'll show him who's boss. I was still mad at my husband, but Tom was making up for it. I brought the crackers and a plate and started spreading them out on the tray. Tom stood next to me and put his hand on my lower back. A little lower, actually. I think he was at least touching the waistband of my skirt. I tensed up. I couldn't remember the last time a man other than my husband had touched me in this place. I looked up at Tom. He was smiling confidently. I realized that I liked his touch. I smiled and finished my plate. I pointed to the door. He said, "Ladies first." I walked to the door, stopped, moved my body, and pulled out the appetizers. I grabbed a beer and sat down to watch the game. My husband sat in his chair. The couch was full. The only chair stood off to the side. I sat down. As I did so, my skirt slid up. I noticed it. Everyone noticed it. My husband's face turned slightly red. Obviously, he wasn't happy. The other guys pretended not to look. Tom looked into my eyes, nodded approvingly, and smiled. I loved all of this. I loved seeing my husband angry and unable to do anything about it. I loved the guys trying to watch and trying not to get caught, and I was really enjoying the attention of this handsome, confident man. I was on my second beer. My husband was trying not to look at me, pretended not to notice me. Tom looked at my feet, then at my eyes, and nodded his head up. Really, he wanted me to show more of my legs? I felt flirty. I had nice legs. Why not? I set my beer down and pretended to adjust my skirt. In fact, I lifted the hem just enough so Tom could see my underwear. I lowered the hem so far up past my knees that it was visible. My husband noticed this and started to say something. He mouthed "Jill" when Tom said, "Leave her alone." My husband started to say something, but just leaned back in his chair and opened another mug of beer. It was pretty clear who was in charge. The other guys were trying to keep out of sight. Tom watched and nodded approvingly. After 2 beers, his approval was starting to turn me on. I smiled flirtatiously at him and pulled my skirt up very obviously this time. There was no doubt that I was showing off. My husband sprawled out in the chair. Tom's control was arousing me. My husband was not a bad lover. He was always in charge during sex, but it was always about him. Tom was teasing me. He was taking matters into his own hands, but it wasn't about him. It was about me. He made me feel sexy. He made me feel like I was reciprocating. We needed another beer. They were in the garage. I got up to get them. Tom offered to help. The thought made me feel a little hot. I was going to be alone with him. When we entered the garage, Tom put his hands on my hips, pulled me to him and said, "I see there's a bit of a cheater in there." I could very well feel his hands on my hips and his breath on my neck. I should have pulled away, but instead I pressed my body into him. He kissed my ear and said, "I like it." He took the package and headed back into the house. I stood there for a minute, catching my breath. As I stood there, I realized that I wished he hadn't tried any. I sighed and returned with another packet. Walking into the room, I headed to my chair. Tom turned to Gary. "Why don't you sit over there so Jill can sit next to me?" My husband turned his head. Tom just looked at him. My husband turned back to the TV again. Gary did as he was told. I walked over to the couch. Tom reached out and grabbed the hem of my skirt and pulled me to the couch. As he pulled me back, I realized that my whole body was in his view. When I lowered myself onto the couch, my skirt was not pulled up in the back, but the front was pulled up high enough to show my underwear again. My husband looked at me, then at Tom, sighed, and went back to playing. And me? I was starting to get aroused. The beer, my husband, Tom's attention, and 3 guys trying to stay out of sight but paying more attention to me than the game was definitely turning me on. Tom put his arm around my shoulders. He looked at my halter top and said, "Is that how you should wear it? I know someone who has the exact same one. It looks like you have too many buttons." I looked down. He was wearing 4 buttons, and I had buttoned 3. One more, and at his angle, my breasts would definitely be visible. I replied, "I don't think so." He replied, "Let's see." He reached down and undid the button. My husband started to say something again, but a look from Tom silenced him. I wondered how Tom could control my husband so much. Then I realized that he was also controlling me, and I loved it. In fact, he was controlling the whole room. He undid a button and looked at my top. He said, "You have very nice breasts." I blushed. I didn't know what to say back. Then he turned to my husband. "Your wife has beautiful breasts." My husband meekly replied, "Yes." Tom asked, "What?" My husband said in a louder voice, "Yes, my wife has beautiful breasts." I felt unreal sitting there listening to them talk about my breasts, but I loved it. I couldn't believe my husband wasn't trying to kill this man and just sitting there. Tom reached into my top and fumbled with it. All the guys, including my husband, were watching what was happening. My husband didn't look angry anymore, he just accepted it. Tom stood up. He took my hand, pulled me behind him, and led me into the kitchen. He put his strong hands on my hips and sat me down on the table. He pulled my skirt up to my waist. He undid the next 2 buttons on my top. Except for my panties, I was completely naked in front of him. I looked at him and asked, "Are you going to have sex with me now?" He kissed my breasts. He kissed me lightly on the lips, pulled away, and said, "Not yet." "Not yet? I'm here on the table and he says, 'Not yet?'" I said it out loud, gently, but I said it. "Not yet?" He said, "No, you haven't reached your potential as an inner cheater yet." I didn't know what would happen next, but I was enjoying the ride so far. He said we should go back to the other room. I started to button my top. He stopped me and said, "Come on." I don't know why I let him do that. Part of me was still angry at my husband because he had called me a cheater, but I knew that wasn't the reason. I enjoyed it. I loved giving up control. I liked the thought of being a cheater. I went back into the other room. Everyone looked over. It was obvious that my top was unbuttoned. Tom came in next to me. He said, "Jill, you don't need that top anymore." All eyes were on me. I liked being on display. I pulled off my top and was about to throw it on the floor. Tom stopped me and told me to hand it to my husband. I walked over and held it out to him. He obediently took it from me and stared at it. As I stood there, Tom came up behind me and put his arm around my waist. He pulled me to him and looked at my husband. He said, "When we got here, it was obvious that Jill didn't want us here. It was also obvious that you weren't paying attention to her. Since we're here, I'm going to make sure this is the best day of her life." He turned me toward him and kissed me hard. His hands pulled my skirt apart and he pulled it down to the floor. I stood in my underwear in front of my husband and 4 strangers. He interrupted the kiss. I looked him in the eyes and asked, "Now?" He took my hand and led me back to the couch. He sat down and pulled me with him. He then looked at the other 3 guys. "What are you guys still dressed? We need to have sex with this woman." They looked at my husband, shrugged, and stripped off their clothes. In the back of my mind, I wondered why I let these men have sex with me. I knew it was because Tom wanted it, and I was going to do it the best I could. Next, all the guys took turns having sex with me. I looked at my husband. I noticed he was fondling himself. I stopped. Tom turned around to see what I was looking at. He laughed. I watched for a minute and then went back to having serious sex with Tom. Afterwards, when I opened my eyes, Tom was sitting on the couch. He said, "Let's take a picture." He told 3 guys to sit in a chair at the other end of the room. One sat in the chair, the other 2 sat on his arms. He told me to lie down in front of them. I did so. He told them to put their arm around each other's shoulders and put their hand on each other's leg. They thought it was a funny shot. Tom took the picture. Then he told them it was time to leave. As they were getting dressed, he told them, "You can talk about this in the car when you go to the hotel. After this, I never want to hear about this day again." He told them that if he ever heard about it again, or if he found out that anyone else found out about it, they would be fired immediately. He said that if there were any repercussions for my husband, they would be fired as well. He promised that if they were fired, they would never work in the industry again. He showed them a picture. He took it above me. I wasn't in the picture. It was just the 3 of them, with no clothes on a chair, hugging each other. He said that if they ever came to another company and talked about it, the picture would go to their customers, co-workers, and management. He beckoned me over to the couch. While I was with Tom, he turned to everyone. "I know none of you have checked your email. When you do, you will know that I have been promoted to CEO. He told them that this meant there would be openings all the way up the chain of command. He looked at my husband. and told him that he had already been selected to lead that group and that he would be promoted tomorrow. He made it clear that it had nothing to do with today. The decision had already been made. He looked at the other 3 guys and told them that my husband was now their supervisor. He made it clear that my husband could fire them at any time. He told them that if my husband fired them, it would be the same as if he fired them, and he would make sure that they would no longer work in the industry. He then looked at my husband. He told him he could fire this team, but it was a very effective team. He said, "Honestly, you're a bit of an asshole. This team is part of why you're successful. If you fire them, I don't believe you'll be successful." After that, Tom looked at me and told me that if I wanted to, I could work for his company anytime I wanted. He told me it was a real job and no strings attached. The 3 guys left. It was just Tom, me, and my husband left. Tom first asked me how my day was. I kissed the tip of his and said it was the most wonderful day of my life. Tom looked at my husband and said he had one more decision to make. He said after today, he was sure I was ready to leave and move on with my life. He looked at me. I didn't disagree with him. He told my husband that if he wanted to leave me, now was the time to show me how much he loved me. I saw my husband hesitate. Then he undressed. Tom asked him if he had anything to say to me. My husband grabbed my hips and started to make love to me and then said, "I love you." All I said was, "Show me how much you love me." Tom got up, got dressed, and said, "I gotta go." As he was leaving, my husband lifted my body in his arms and hugged me. It's been 6 months now. At work, my husband's team is doing well. At home, he has become much more attentive to me. Our lovemaking has become more mutual and more satisfying. We still have some issues. He can still be a bit arrogant, but I have become more confident as well. There is a good balance between us. He has become better at treating me, and as he treats me better, I treat him better. He doesn't bring guests home without asking. When he asks, I always say yes. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.